The Mayberry Effect is a 2021 film by documentary maker Chris Hudson that attempts to understand the enduring impact of the Andy Griffith Show after all of these years. Folks, I'll let you know what I think about this movie in just a moment, but first let me introduce myself. Hi folks, my name is Dave Sundstrom, and I like to think of myself as something of a pop culture historian, especially when it comes to music, movies, and television. Simply put, I love talking about this stuff. So with that said, let's get rolling. For over 60 years, the Andy Griffith Show has been part of the television landscape here in the United States, and in many other parts of the world for that matter. And I don't believe there has ever been a time that this show hasn't been on the air somewhere during the past 6 decades. When we talk about living a simpler life, something akin to living in Mayberry, most everybody knows what we're talking about. In fact, the country music band Rascal Flatts had a huge hit with their song Mayberry, which was all about that quest for a simpler time. But did that simpler time really ever actually exist? That's one of the questions that Chris Hudson sets out to answer in his new movie, which I, by the way, thoroughly enjoyed. That probably won't come as much of a surprise to those of you that know me for the huge Andy Griffith fan that I am. Yep, without a doubt, the Mayberry Effect is an absolute joy to watch. This movie has a ton of heart and is a celebration of not only the Andy Griffith Show itself, but also the show's fans. Along the way, Hudson doesn't shy away from controversial topics, like the fact that Mayberry seemed to be mostly a town full of white folk. But a good portion of the movie centers around the Mayberry tribute artists who, as a labor of love, spend their weekends attending parades and other events as their favorite characters from the TV show. In fact, the heart and soul of this movie is a Mayberry tribute artist named David Browning, who for years has been channeling Don Knotts' beloved character, Deputy Barney Fife. Hudson has a ton of fun allowing us to share in the joy that Browning clearly feels every time he puts on that deputy's uniform. Ironically, as this movie was being made, Browning was wrestling with the difficult decision to retire from active duty as a tribute artist. If you are a fan of the Andy Griffith Show, or if you're one of those people wondering what the big deal about the show is, well then I highly recommend this movie to you. It is truly a love letter of sorts to the Andy Griffith Show by Hudson. You can rent or purchase it on all of the major streaming outlets, but I'll post a link to the movie on Amazon in the description section of this video to make things easier. Speaking of Chris Hudson, I recently had a chance to visit with him for a few minutes about this movie. Hey folks, I am super excited. I've got Chris Hudson here. He is the writer, the director, the producer, the editor. He's wearing one hat today, but in the movie he's wearing many, many hats. And he's graciously said he's willing to visit with us for a few minutes. So I've got some questions, but first off, thanks for joining me, Chris.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
As folks already know, I am a huge fan of your movie. So tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the journey that led you to make a documentary about the nostalgic, almost magical effect that Mayberry has on a lot of us.
Yeah, so I grew up in North Carolina, mostly in Charlotte. And when I started watching television as a young kid, I loved PBS. I loved everything about PBS. I loved Ken Burns documentaries, Rick Steves travelogues, and that kind of inspired me to want to do travelogues in the future as well as documentaries. And so in college, I ended up working for WTVI, the PBS station there, as an intern. And then afterwards, after graduating, I went into producing some of their documentaries. And so I have been in the business for about 20 years. It wasn't until 2015 when I decided to go back to grad school at Wake Forest University to get my master's in documentary film. And so I spent 3 years working on that. And the Mayberry Effect ended up being my thesis film for that for my school project. And so I kind of developed a 45-minute version of it for my thesis film. And after I graduated in 2018, I decided to develop it into a feature-length film. So that's kind of a little bit how it got started and where it kind of came from. I met David Browning, who's the Mayberry deputy, on a car commercial. I used to work in TV, not only doing documentaries, but TV commercials as well. And met David Browning on the commercial set and thought he was a fascinating character, and said, a few weeks later after a commercial shoot, I asked him, would you be interested in doing this documentary? And he said, well, I'd like to be a part of it, but I don't want it to be all about me. He was about to retire, so he wanted to kind of scale back a little bit. And I said, okay. He's like, but I will take you up to Mayberry Days, introduce you to everybody, and show you a much bigger picture. And that's kind of where the idea of the Mayberry Effect came from, was after him introducing me to the Mayberry world.
Really. I gotta tell you, that part of the documentary really caught me by surprise. I kind of knew, I thought I knew where you were going with the movie. There are a number of surprises, but the biggest surprise was just the affectionate tribute to David that the movie has. I mean, he really is a wonderful character. And beyond that, a really great human being, it seems.
I don't think the intention at the beginning was it was to kind of show the super fans and the effect that the shows had on America and our American culture. But then in the making of it, and towards the end, I realized this is also becoming a kind of a tribute piece to David Browning. And so he felt that, and I realized that on the back end. It was kind of a side effect. Wasn't planning on it, but I'm very, very happy with it, that it turned out that way.
I was too. It was one of the pleasant surprises from the movie, Christopher. So it's clearly a huge labor of love, this movie of yours. Why do you feel like it's important to make a movie like The Mayberry Effect right now?
Well, there are tons of documentaries out there that deal with social justice and social issues, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's from homelessness to Black Lives Matters, and they're all important. For me, this was something where you can talk about something culturally, but it could also impact people's lives today. So it wasn't a struggle in the sense of no money, no home, no family, battling the police. It was a struggle for the future of America, the future of how we connect with people, the future of our own neighborhoods and community. So how do you tell a story where it's fun? It's a fun story. It's a fun documentary. It was fun to make, but then also bring a bigger picture in, bring a bigger message in, going, you know what? The idea of a simpler time, everybody has their own viewpoints on that. But, how can we reach out to our neighbor today? How can we reach across, go across the street and meet new neighbors? How can we treat each other, at different places that we go to in a better, nicer Mayberry, more Mayberry way, really? And so to me, the message is just as strong of how do we treat our fellow neighbors and people in the community and people that we know as it is in any other kind of, social justice documentary. So it's really kind of, I had this bumper sticker that I had made called Make America Mayberry Again. And some people would say, hey, does Mayberry mean white again? And I'm like, absolutely not. Mayberry to me means love. Like if you replace Mayberry with love, you're just literally trying to make America Mayberry love again, right? And so it's really just kind of spreading the Mayberry love and spreading love in general. So that's why I think it's a very, very important piece for it to come out today. I think it's very, very necessary and a message that I want everybody to connect with.
I definitely felt that message come through loud and clear as I was watching your documentary. So mission accomplished, Chris. So just, I gotta ask you, since clearly you're a super fan the way I am as well, what's your earliest memory of the Andy Griffith Show in your own life? And then maybe share a favorite episode. And don't worry if your favorite episode changes tomorrow. Mine, I have a rotating list of favorite episodes.
Well, I grew up watching the show. I remember it always being on between 5 and 6 o'clock at night before dinner time. So my mom and dad would have it on before we would eat dinner. I think the first real memory I have of it is watching it at 9 years old. And I think really the episode that stands out in my mind is the citizen's arrest episode. I just remember that entire scene of there and, them chasing each other around and arguing with each other there in the square. And it was just, we all laughed out loud. I think it was just the time where all four of us in our house just laughed out loud. And it is very, very poignant. I mean, so now having two children now, I think, the episode with Opie and the Birds is very, very poignant, and being able to share these kind of messages and morals, with our children and our kids today. So I think I'm connecting more with the episodes that have Opie in them now, because I have 2 kids, and try to think of, I'm not always going to get everything right within my family or with my kids, but I'm going to try to make the best effort I can. And I feel like Andy Griffith did that as well with Opie, and sometimes he ate crow, sometimes he got it right. So
yeah, exactly. Speaking of eating crow, there's another Opie episode that I love. Mr. McBeevy is just one of my favorite as well. But one of the things that's so cool about the Andy Griffith Show, all these episodes you've mentioned, and many that come to my mind as well, it's the Andy Griffith Show, but it's that supporting cast that just makes it so wonderful. If you think about Citizen's Arrest, holy cow, Don Knotts and Jim Nabors, they made that episode. All of the laughs, and I have fond memories of that episode as well. It's because of the comedic talents of those 2 fine actors.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris. So I got to ask, got you on the horn. Clearly, you're a talented filmmaker. What's next? What's next for you, my friend?
Well, I picked up a documentary I've been working on and off for about the past 3 years as well. It's called Black and White, and it's the Gene Herrick story. Gene Herrick's actually in the Mayberry Effect, but he was an AP photographer during the 1950s, and he was famous for taking the Rosa Parks picture of her getting thumbprinted there in Alabama. So he's had tons of pictures of Martin Luther King and all sorts of people. So I'm trying to tell the story behind those pictures, especially in the civil rights movement. So I've been working on that. Wanted to do something with Dreama Denver, Bob Denver's wife, about Gilligan.
Yeah.
And not just all about Gilligan, but about Dreama's life as well, and her and Bob taking care of their son for 20 years. And then I've got, I'm doing research now on a Social Security documentary, which doesn't sound as much fun, but I think there's something there that I think everybody in the United States who actually works and pays Social Security would be interested in, and trying to find out where our money is in that context. So a few different interesting projects that I'm working on, trying to get into.
I love it. Your next projects clearly have a broad spectrum of different topics, but all of them sound really interesting. Looking forward to seeing them, Chris. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to let you tell folks where they can. I think I've already mentioned it in the video, but let's mention it one more time. Where can folks see the Mayberry Effect right now?
Well, you can find my documentary on Amazon Prime Video, iTunes, Apple TV, Google Play, Vudu, YouTube TV, places like that. And you can also kind of see a little bit of me in Mayberry Man as the documentary filmmaker with the Mayberry Effect, but I'm playing Craig Hudson and not Chris Hudson. And so you get to see a little bit of that in there as well. So that, it's hopefully you can find it, enjoy it, just like Mayberry Man.
Could be a completely new career for you, a career in acting, Chris. You were so convincing as Craig in that movie.
It was a stretch. Let's just say that.
Well, I loved it. It was great to see you in the movie. And when you reached out, I thought it was so much fun that someone I'd seen in the movie was actually corresponding with me. Thank you again for joining today. Really appreciate it. And let me just tell my viewers, hey, this is a flick you should definitely see if you're a fan of the Andy Griffith Show, or for that matter, classic television from the 50s, 60s, 70s, even on into the 80s. You know the good stuff. This is a movie I highly recommend. Thanks again, Christopher.
Thanks for having me.
So there you go. One more picture. Let's go with something from a favorite episode of Chris's as well as mine, Citizen's Arrest. Such a funny episode. Please share your memories in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And what the heck, why not consider subscribing to the channel? I talk about music, movies, and mostly television from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, and as always, thank you so much for watching.